I'm trying my best to accommodate you.
It doesn't seem like it. You're not golden ruling it. You're not doing unto others as you would have others do unto you.
Unfortunately, the golden rule is not a federal regulation.
Golden rule's on top. Federal law is second.
In this scene from season 9 of Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David tries to invoke the golden rule at the airport. The concept of the golden rule is to treat others the way you would want to be treated, and its origins are at least 2,500 years old. This concept is present in all of the world's major religious traditions. Despite the long history and widespread usage of the golden rule, Milan Batinich says there is an even better rule to apply during our interactions with others: the platinum rule. The platinum rule says, do unto others as they'd like done unto them. This concept originated from the 1996 book of the same name, written by Dr. Tony Alessandra and Dr. Michael J. O'Connor. Because each of us has a preferred communication style, the platinum rule suggests that we flex our communication style to better interact with others who have a different preference. Milan Batinich is a motivational speaker and contact center leader who moonlights as a storm chaser. On this episode of Next in Queue, we discuss why understanding communication styles is important, different options for evaluating communication styles, characteristics of the 4 primary styles, why modifying behavior leads to success in relationships with others, real-world examples for how communication styles impact people at work, and how Ikigai changed Milan's professional path. Time is running out to get your tickets for the Call and Contact Center Expo in Las Vegas this April 26th and 27th. Not only would I love to see you there, you can get your tickets for free by using the link in the liner notes and using my promo code ROB100. And you'll also get to see Milan Batinich's session called Stop Forcing Square Pegs into Round Holes. Get your tickets today, and I will see you there. Now, let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy 2 Vision. Eliminate blind spots and see right through every conversation with Happy 2 Vision. Learn more at happitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
Hey there. Welcome to another episode of Next in Queue. Today, really, the first returning guest for full episode, and I believe this is like the 3rd appearance all told. Milan, thanks for joining. How are you?
Rob, I am living the dream. Thank you so much for having me for the 3rd time.
I mean, the dream is when Purdue actually wins a national championship. So you're not living that. It's a different kind of dream that you're living, but that's okay because my Jayhawks also no longer in the tournament. We're both heartbroken.
Yes.
Such is life. Such is life.
Move on. Last Thursday and Friday was terrible days. Thursday night, Purdue women lost. Friday night, Purdue men lost. So now I have all the time in the world to talk about communication styles and whatever else you want to talk about.
So that's what we're going to do. We are going to talk about communication styles and really just kind of dive into that. So let's start with why anyone should consider learning about communication styles and implementing strategies based off of communication styles.
Yeah, that's a great starting question. I think understanding your own communication style, so having self-awareness of how you communicate, is a necessity in life. You need to understand how you come across the people. So not only understand yourself, but then how your style, your communication style impacts others. Like for myself, I have a high drive for social interaction. So I like to be around people. I like to have these conversations. So because of that, I sometimes my high drive to interact with others, sometimes I'll share information that's unfiltered. I'll just share random thoughts about astronauts and black and gold walls and different things like that. Whereas someone who does not have a high drive for social interaction, they're going to be more reserved and introspective and think about the information, process it internally versus sharing half-baked ideas out loud. So I think it's really vital, especially in the workplace, in a professional environment, and in any relationship that people have, just understanding themselves and understanding, how they come across to other individuals and to their teams. And then, I think companies overall, divisions, departments of companies can put together a strategy on and identifying, okay, say, for example, how does Milan communicate? How does Rob communicate? Well, what does Rob need in order for him to share his thoughts? Or what does he need in order for him to communicate the way that he enjoys communicating best? Because there's so many different avenues, certain people prefer email and prefer to be more assertive and driving and different things like that. So I think it's a necessity, because if you don't understand somebody else's communication style, or even worse, if you don't understand your own and how you come across, then it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get something out of the way, and let's talk about the difference between communication styles, sometimes also called behavioral styles, versus some of these personality tests that are out there. What's the difference between those two, and why is it important that I understand the difference?
Yeah, so personality and behavior is very similar. The main difference, I would say, is personality is really what other people see. So, well, when we talk sports, Rob, you see my personality come out in some of the ridiculous things I say about amazing teams. And with behavior, behaviors are a little bit different, because behaviors are really the results or the response to somebody's needs. So every human on earth has primary motivating drives, and based on those drives, it predicts what our needs are. Like I mentioned at the beginning, one of my needs is social interaction with other people, a highly extroverted individual. So because of that, I'm going to behave in a way, or my behavior is going to show up in a response to that need. So the way I behave, the way I interact, the way I communicate is going to be a response to my need based on my drive. So it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more in depth, I'd say, than personality. Personality is more guided around, seeing how somebody, say, interacts versus the behaviors of the individual. And if you can coach and manage employees based on their needs, then you're going to see the behaviors that are needed for the workplace or for the specific job that employee is doing.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the communication or behavior style assessments that are out there. I know you've got a favorite, but what options are out there? What might people have heard of?
Yeah, so I'll start with my favorite one, predictive index. It's a behavioral assessment and cognitive assessment. That one I absolutely love. Some others that people may have heard of, culture index, Myers-Briggs, DISC, strength finders, are all very, very, very similar. And those are probably the biggest ones. Present day, there's 1,200 behavioral or personality assessments on the market globally. But I'd say those are probably the 5 or 6 that you hear the most often out of the 1,200.
So if there are 1,200 out there, if I am leading an organization and I'm considering one of these, how in the heck am I supposed to make a decision about what to choose and what's going to be effective?
Yeah, I would say identifying what is most important for you. So each one has something that's very specific, strong suit for that assessment. So of the 1,200, there's probably over half of those are meant for your personal life, not for the workplace. So you can kind of cut those out right away. Something like DISC, it says right on their front page or main page of their website, you can't use it for hiring because it's not validated for hiring. So if you're looking for an assessment tool where you can assess candidates before making a hiring decision, that would rule out most of them. There's only a few in the market that you can use for hiring. And then if you're looking for a tool just for coaching, then it kind of opens up to several dozen. Again, if you're looking for a management tool, coaching tool. So it really depends on identifying, okay, how am I going to use this tool? If I'm using it for hiring or identifying the strong candidates that are a good fit, if I'm using it for coaching, professional development, managing employees, and if I'm using it specifically for the workplace, then that list goes from 1,200 down to about 4 different tools. So it
Yeah.
really depends on what people need to use it for. Will really help them kind of narrow down which ones to look at.
Well, that's certainly helpful. I'm glad I don't have to worry about 1,200 different ones. I can narrow things down. Let's talk about how we end up categorizing these communication styles or behavior styles. There are different labels depending on what you use, but let's just kind of go through some of the general characteristics of each of the different styles.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are several different styles, and really it's based on each individual person's drives. So depending, the 4 primary human drives, you have the drive to acquire and achieve. So how independent are you versus how collaborative? So that impacts how you'll communicate, and that'll impact your behaviors. The second is your drive to bond or belong. So that's looking really at extroversion. How socially driven are you? That affects how you communicate. You prefer email communication or in-person interactions? Third is the drive to be challenged or comprehend. So really that is pace of activity. So identifying what type of pace of activity will I thrive in the workplace? So will I respond positively to pressure? Do I prefer a type of work environment that is steady and calm and process oriented? That affects your communication style and how you communicate and how you like to receive communication. And then the fourth one is your drive to define and defend. So how detail oriented are you? Somebody who has a high drive to define is going to send out emails in paragraph format. They want to receive emails in paragraph format. Those that have that low drive, bullet points. Well, or better yet, just send a message through Teams or Slack or something like that, or just give them a quick call, because they're the person will not read a 4-paragraph email. They need it summarized. They need the Cliff Notes version. So really, those 4 primary drives really dictate how people will communicate and how they'll like to receive communication. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
The thing that I have found most useful about understanding this is in how I am going to craft communication thoughtfully, keeping the receiver in mind. And so I've worked with people that, they need all the numbers, all the details, like everything has to be super detailed. And then you've got the people that are basically look at that and go, TLDR, give me the top 3 bullet points. What do I need to do about this? Right? They don't want all of the details and the justification. They don't really care how you feel about anything. Like just give me those bullet points. And you can lose people if you just reach out with bullet points and there's someone who needs more information, and they can they can take offense to that. And vice versa, you may find that you're not getting things done because you're, being too brief and direct with some people, or not brief enough. So
Yeah,
all of like understanding that makes those relationships with coworkers easier because I'm paying attention to how I'm communicating.
right. And you read my mind when you brought up taking offense, because absolutely. And what I've noticed too over the years is individuals that have that high attention to detail and prefer longer format communications, when they send it to someone who may not have as much of a need for the details, because they've already put in all the data, like you said, the numbers, the information, they've done all the research that they could before sending their solution over, say via email. That when you correct them or tell them that something in the email or something in their research is wrong, those individuals tend to be the most sensitive to that criticism, because they're really, from their perspective, there wasn't much more they could do. They've
Right.
done all the research, they've dotted all the I's, they've crossed all the T's, they've done everything. And then when somebody comes back and says, this is wrong, try again or redo it or fix this, a lot of times they'll take offense to that, because they're like, wait a second, I did everything I possibly could within my knowledge and within my skill set. And now you're saying that it's incorrect. So typically those individuals, I've noticed, will be really sensitive to that criticism, to that feedback. I've also noticed individuals who have a high drive to bond and belong. So they have that social acceptance. So they need social acceptance. They need people to like them. They need to look good in other people's eyes. And then when that doesn't happen, they can become offended as well, or be
Mm,
sensitive to that criticism, because they're like, wait a second, why don't you like me? I need to be liked. I need to I need to change
yeah.
your perspective of me. How do I do that?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? And I think our listeners will recognize people in their lives, in their work lives, and possibly in their personal lives, where um, certain people need certain things, right? There's the people that when you talk to, you kind of want to start the conversation off with maybe asking about their kids or finding out what they did this weekend. And that's really important because they're the people that they want to be liked and have that personal relationship. And there are other people that you work with, like that would be the worst way to start a conversation because they don't want to talk about,
Absolutely.
like, I'm at work, I'm trying to get things done. We're not talking about those things.
Yeah.
And like understanding that that is just a behavioral preference, a communication preference really helps you reduce friction in the workplace when you know that, understand it, and make that approach.
Absolutely. And it's funny, the way you worded that is, I worked for an organization that at the beginning of our monthly meetings, we would go around the room, and there was probably a dozen of us, 10 of us. And we were asked to share over the last month what's a professional good thing that's going on, like share good news, something professional, and then share good news, something personal. And I know there's individuals that were on that team that they had to come with their strategy ideas for the company, how to lead the company in the future, and all these things that take a lot of effort to put together. And of this 3-hour meeting, the one thing they dreaded most was coming up with a personal good news to share with the group and a professional good news. They dreaded it. They dreaded it. So I know one person that would sometimes show up late on purpose, because being a virtual meeting, you pop up at the end, and then they would listen to everyone else's good news, and then they would just be like, "Oh yeah, same goes for me as what Rob said or as what Milan said." It's like they dreaded coming up with some good news in their life that they were willing to share with the rest of the group. Um, and really, when we talk about communication styles, it's all about, as in any relationship, compromise. If I know who I am and how I come across, and you know who you are and how you come across, and if we're different, if I can modify my behavior or adjust and adapt to what you need a little bit, and you do the same for me, then we can meet in the middle and be very successful. It's not that everyone needs to be exactly the same behaviorally to be able to work well together. I've worked with people that are the exact opposite of me. And once we understood who the other person was, then we were able to work really well together. Up until that point, though, it was a little tough, not
Yeah.
really understanding like, oh, that's what this person needs. It's not the same. They're not the same as me. So I need to
Right.
adapt.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is important to recognize is, as good as the golden rule is that we've all heard, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, that actually doesn't work very well because most people don't want the same thing you want.
Right, right. It's now more so the platinum rule. Treat others the way they want and need to be treated. Yeah, because the way you want to be treated could be completely different than the way I need or want to be treated. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, right, there are assessments out there, and we've talked about those, but in the real world, I don't always have the opportunity to go up to someone and say, oh, well, I know everyone's taken this assessment and I want to know what type you are so that I can be more effective at communicating with you. Like, that's kind of a weird thing. Although culturally, it can really work in organizations that kind of live in that and do the
Right.
assessment with everyone. But right, if I'm meeting with someone who's outside of my organization, I'm not
Mhm.
necessarily going to have that. Can you talk to me about some things that maybe can help me pick up, like some clues that I could pick up, like if I'm meeting someone over Zoom or if I'm going to their office, that might tip me off, aside from just the way they communicate, about how I might recognize their particular style?
Yeah, no, that's great. Great question. So I'm sure you've heard the 7-38-55 rule.
I
7%.
haven't, so let's
Okay.
bring it in. Bring it in.
All right. All right. So 7% of communication is the words that are being said or the words being used. 38% is tone and 55% is body language. So if it's a face-to-face meeting, you can really read a lot about a person, um, or or you'll learn a lot about how they prefer to communicate, or the way they need to be communicated with, based on seeing their movements, seeing them, and understanding. Like myself, during this conversation, sometimes my chair, you'll see me go like this, is because um, I need a lot of variety, and I respond well to pressure. So because of that, I'm good with the conversation moving at a faster than average pace. So that's part of my communication style. So being able to see their movements and things like that. Also, if you communicate with them ahead of time before you get in a meeting with them, and you notice how they communicate maybe via text or LinkedIn messages or emails, and you see that, maybe they left out some details. I've had a conversation with somebody recently where, I don't know what their profile is or their type is, but they told me on one day, let's do this and this, and then 2 days later, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. I told them right away, that sounds great, deal done, good to go. Then 2 days later, they're like, hey, I was thinking about it, so how about we do this? And I'm like, yeah, it's already done because you told me the same thing 2 days ago. Like, for me, they probably don't have a high attention to detail. They're probably not going to be the types to communicate in long paragraphs just because, they messaged me pretty much the same thing 48 hours later. It's like, yep, yeah, I've already done that. What you asked me to do 2 days ago, like, you already sent this. It's okay.
Yeah.
I get it. Um, and just being able to see how they interact. So how quickly are they speaking? How are they fast paced? How well are they listening? So if you ask somebody a question during one of your podcasts and they give you an answer and you're like, well, that's a decent answer, but you didn't really answer my question. It kind of gives you some insights on their communication styles or behavioral styles. So that's a way you can do it. So sometimes it's difficult, to tell when you first hop on a Zoom call with someone. But I would say over, first 5-10 minutes of having a conversation, you can start to pick up on certain characteristics or traits in the way they communicate and different things like that.
Yeah. One of the things that I think people should also recognize is that while I may have a preferred style,
Mhm.
I can change, adapt based on the environment that I'm in, the situation that I'm in. And it's important that we recognize that that's required of us sometimes, because you may
Right.
have a team who all have kind of the same preferred style. And if you just have four people and they all are kind of that dominant, right? Make decisions, move quickly, give me the bullets. They're going to have a really difficult time operating together,
Yes.
because there's going to be some of this, and they're not necessarily thinking through all of the things that ideally a good team with a lot of different styles will think
Right.
through.
Right. Yeah. Because really, an effective team is people that have complementary styles to one another. Like you said, if you have all the same people on the same team that are dominant individuals, they're going to come up with these very creative, outside the box ideas, like off the wall ideas. And they're going to get that idea 60, 70, 80% of the way there. And then they're going to look and see a shiny object, or look out the window, see a purple squirrel. And then they're going to go to a different idea. So they really need to have individuals on
Hey,
the team.
this is a hedgehog, not a squirrel. Just so we're clear, the hedgehog's name is Hero, the hedgehog, not a squirrel.
Oh man, I didn't even see that on your shirt.
Just need
um,
to make sure everybody
yeah,
understands
everybody understands it's a hedgehog named
our
Hero.
mascot is a hedgehog.
So sorry. Anyways, so then you need people on the team that can take that idea that sometimes is kind of half baked, not really fully baked. Take that idea and then really refine it and define it, and maybe poke holes in it. Find, okay, how will this not work? And then let's make changes. And then you also need people on the team then that can take that final idea and see it through to execution or implementation. And then you need people on the team that are really focused on, okay, this idea has been implemented. So now how do we really keep people motivated to continue with this idea, so it doesn't just kind of like drop off, as so, flavor of the week type of thing. So yeah, so you definitely need everybody on the team to really be able to collaborate and work together. And it also depends on the strategy and what's trying to be accomplished. If it's a startup company, I've seen startup companies where they're really dominant and driven on driving revenue, driving growth. But then as they kind of get settled, it's like, okay, now we need to add people to the team that have these other complementary behaviors or styles. Otherwise, we're not ever going to see things through to implementation or get things done. Things will just kind of fall apart. So you definitely need everybody on the team to have success.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that means that I need to be a little bit different than what I'm most comfortable with,
Right.
because that's what the team needs. And so that's the role I'm going to serve within that particular environment, even if it's not particularly comfortable for me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's so true.
So let's talk about some real world examples. You've shared a few along the way, but some real world examples where either you or people that you've worked with in the past have seen success because they identified, or maybe some failures because things weren't identified.
Yeah.
What do you have to share along those lines?
Oh man, how much time do we have, Rob?
I mean, we got all the time we need. All the time we need.
Right.
We got
Both
way
of our
more
time
time than
counts.
Purdue and KU have in the
Right.
tournament.
Exactly. So there's no point in watching Gonzaga tonight.
That's
Um, yeah, so that's that question, that's loaded. So really, uh, typically you'll see people in the workplace who are similar to one another will get along best. Doesn't mean they'll always get the work done, but they typically will work well together. Um, so I've seen it, in my career. I've seen an example where two people working together who are exactly the opposite. from one another. Probably first 6 months that they worked together, where there wasn't issues. I wouldn't call it issues, but there was definitely some communication obstacles when working together. And a lot of times for one individual, it took them time to trust the other person. So that's another thing. People typically who have a lower drive to bond and belong don't really have high extroversion. Typically, it'll take them longer to trust somebody new that they're meeting. So I know one person, took them probably about 6 months to trust another individual on the team, one of their peers, one of their colleagues. And part of it was, some people will start off with, if you have a glass of water and the water represents trust, when somebody meets you, that glass is full of water. And as they get to know you, maybe a little bit of water splashes out here and there as they get to know you. Some of the trust kind of falls out. Then there's individuals on the opposite end of the spectrum that start off with an empty glass, so no trust. And then it's like, okay, as I get to know you, as you prove yourself, as you are good on your word, then I'll slowly pour water in and let that trust build over time. And a lot of times it'll take, several months for that trust to be built. And that's what we saw with a couple individuals that work together. And then another example, is seeing people who are very similar to one another. Because of that, depending on how similar they are, and what their type is or their profile is, they'll work well together until they don't. So a lot of times they'll work really well together, but there's certain types of people that are extremely competitive. So they'll work well together until they're competing against one another. And then all of a sudden, it's, the competition is open. So sometimes that can have a negative impact on that relationship and negative impact on the way they communicate with each other, because it went from let's work as a team and accomplish our goals as a team to, well, now even though you're still on the team, you're still at this organization, you're almost, and this is probably a really harsh way to say it, but you're almost like my enemy because I'm trying to outperform or perform better than you, versus that team oriented feel. So I've also seen people that are very competitive that have worked well together, but then when they're put against each other, then sometimes that relationship will crumble and fall apart because they were put in that situation. So that's just a couple examples of that. And really, it goes back to what you were saying a few minutes ago of being able to adapt and know, okay, if I know I'm competitive, if I know you're competitive, okay, how can we, although we're both very competitive individuals, how can we set that aside and collaborate and work together to get a project done or to work well as a team? So really, it goes back to, it may not be comfortable for you to adapt to somebody else's style, but it's a necessity. It's a necessary thing to do in order for it to be successful. Otherwise, you'll just come across as the toxic person in the organization that everyone has to adapt to you versus you also adapting to them.
I will also say, like, you can learn a lot by working with someone of a different style if you pay attention to what they do that's successful and when it's successful that is different than how you would approach something. I experienced this firsthand when, for a long time, I had to work directly with someone. This was for training facilitation, a relatively long rollout that I had to co-facilitate with someone who was very different stylistically than I was. But what I was able to learn in that process was when his strengths really shined and why that worked, so that I could recognize when I wasn't leaning into those things, but should be, so that I could do that. Because there are times when it's great that maybe you're a little more long-winded and whimsical and you're building relationships. And there are other times where you just need to move on and get things done.
Right.
And we need to make decisions and we need to be more efficient. So being able to recognize how your communication impacts that in a situation can be really useful. And I think until you start to assess yourself and start to look at other people, it's hard to recognize that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good that you recognize that and we're able to lean into their strengths. And I think to piggyback on that comment, also understanding, so once you do understand and can recognize that in other people you're working with, then also recognizing maybe where you're lacking and understanding the type of person you need to bring into the fold or add to the team or bring onto a project in order for it to be successful. So understanding, like I'll use myself as an example. I do not have a high attention to detail, and so if I'm working on
I'm shocked.
Oh, I don't know if I should be offended right now, but
Hey, I know your style. I got it.
you know me. You know me.
I see you.
Yeah. So if I'm working on a project that requires a lot of follow through, a lot of detailed information, recognizing that, hey, this may not be Milan's strongest area of expertise. So, who do I need to bring in from my team to help me on this project? Because that is one of their strong areas. So for instance, if I'm in the past, if I filled out an RFP, I've built a relationship. We've been invited to the RFP, but then when I look at the RFP and I see the Excel spreadsheet with 45 different tabs, I look at that and I'm like, I think I'm gonna go take a nap. It's brutal to me. But then
Right.
I share it with I bring in somebody else or some people from the team that have high attention to detail and they're eating it up. They're like, this is amazing. I can't wait to get started. Where I'm like, let me know if you need my help. I hope you don't.
Yeah. Well, and understanding how you can motivate people. So whether you're in sales or you're in customer service or you are in operations, like regardless of your role, there are going to be times when you need to get people on your side, right? You need to influence them for a positive outcome. And understanding what motivates them and what you can provide in that conversation will go a long way, because some people I'm going to have to bring hard data, and hard data is the only thing that is going to convince them that right, your way is the way that they want to go. And with other people, like, you can bring them all the hard data in the world, and that's not what is going to motivate them. It's just not.
Right. I think that goes to, so we talked about the 4 primary motivating drives. There's a fifth that's a little bit more secondary, but you just hit on the head, and it's the way people make decisions and what they need in order to make a decision. So there's individuals that will take everything into consideration. What's logical, facts, what do the statistics say? What's their gut feel, or maybe emotions will play into their decision making. And then there's people on either end of that. There's individuals that have the ability to remove emotion or empathy from their decision making process and make decisions just based on what's factual, what's the stats say, what's logical. And then you have people on the other end that are like making decisions a lot of times on, how does this make me feel? So then when they receive that information, it's more so based on, sometimes depending on how subjective their decision making is, it could be based on how they feel that day. Today I feel this way, so I think I'm going to do X versus Y, even though the logical thing is Y, but I'm going to do X because of the way it feels. So I think a lot of that plays into, for me, you, everybody, to make a decision. It's, how much of the logic do I need or the facts do I need versus, how is it going to affect my team? I can make a decision that logic says do this, but how will it negatively impact my team's morale over here? And then it's just, trying to define that and find, what's the best call, or how can I modify both of those to kind of meet in the middle again around. And I know I'm talking to the king of empathy, so I won't dive into empathy too much. But
Wow, did I just get a new title? I'm gonna have to put that on the LinkedIn profile.
You totally should.
King of empathy. I don't know that everyone would agree with that, but I like where you're going. I appreciate that.
How about king of knowing about empathy? Maybe not always showing empathy. How is that better?
Now I just sound like a know-it-all. That's what I feel like just happened here.
You know what? But you didn't call yourself that. An outsider called you that, so it's okay.
Okay. Deep breath. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I'm gonna let it go. So, Milan, I know that you can actually help people if they want to dig into this more, whether that's understanding it better or maybe they want to have their team be assessed. So what's the best way for them to talk to you about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say they can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or shoot me an email. Yeah, I would say, that's the best. They can call, however they want to get a hold of me. All my information's on LinkedIn, so they can find me there.
Probably
Also,
missing some details, folks, but that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So if you go look up Milan Batinich on LinkedIn, MilanBatinich, you can find me there.
Look at the
Instagram.
details coming through now.
Yeah. Also MilanMotivates.com. Milan Motivates on LinkedIn. That's my motivational speaking and professional development company that I own. You can find me there.
I'm glad
Yeah.
you brought that up. So let's talk about that a little bit. We're talking about communication styles, but I want to hear about this new thing you've got going on. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So it all came from figuring out what type of work am I passionate about. So have you ever heard of the Japanese concept ikigai?
Well, let's tell everyone about it. It doesn't matter
Okay.
if I've heard of it.
All right, perfect. So really it looks at, what are you passionate about? What type of work brings you joy? And then what type of work not only brings you joy, but are you good at, and where you can make a living? So, and where it's going to have a positive impact on the world. So what are you passionate about? What are you joyful about? Type of work that brings you joy and passion. Can you be good at it? Or are you good at it? Can you make a living off it? Can you make money from it? And then does it have a positive impact on the world around you, on other people? So as I've spoke at conferences for the last several years and working with human behaviors and things like that. Ended up going back to school last year, got certification in human behaviors, and found that outside of my day job, which I absolutely love, I also love and I'm very passionate about professional development and helping other people find their ikigai. So finding that joy. So Milan Motivates it's just launching right now. The website's being built as we speak. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, the sites are there, but they're not fully built yet. So I'm hoping to launch here within the next month or so. But really it's speaking for organizations. I've spoken at universities, schools, really helping people figure out what is it that would bring you joy? What type of work would bring you joy? And so I do speaking engagements, do workshops, all sorts of things like that. And the name of the company is Milan Motivates. Went with an alliteration, so it's easy to remember. And yeah, so I'm really, really stoked, really excited about that. And actually, I'm speaking in 2 weeks at the Iowa Employment Conference, where there's going to be attorneys and lawyers and HR people there, speaking on employee engagement and employee retention through Milan Motivates. So looking forward to that. And so I'm really excited about it. Really excited. So thanks for asking.
Well, by the time people hear this, I'm confident that the website and all of that will be done and people can go and see it in all its glory. So we've got a little bit of lead time between when we're recording this and when people will actually hear it. So Don't be afraid, people, to go out and check out the website. If you see a big under construction, icon, then just message Milan and just say, hey, when's the website going to be done? I want to check it out, and just flood him, inundate him with messages.
Yes.
I know he'll love it.
I will. I may not respond with a lot of detail, but I will respond. And I'll say it here because it's easy to remember. The email is that this is already active and live. It's milan@milanmotivates.com. How easy is that?
That is really easy. I know you put a lot of time and effort into that.
Rob, I appreciate your seriousness and that you're not ever sarcastic with me.
Never, not a bit. And that's why I love talking to you, because I can be that way, and you're a good sport about it. So we'll definitely make sure liner notes have all of these ways for you to get in touch with Milan. He can absolutely be a great resource for you for a variety of different things, but certainly for the workshops. And if you want to know more about communication styles, he can help you with that. If you just want to have a conversation about Purdue basketball, he will absolutely entertain that as well. I guarantee it.
Yes. If you come to me and you are a Hoosier fan, I will let you know that my communication style around that will be a little more serious. Yes. So if you are a Hoosier and you want to talk Purdue Hoosier basketball, do not get offended when I talk about how much more amazing Purdue is. Okay.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Milan, thanks for joining the show. As always, Rob. Appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please, by all means, subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.